We jump in randomly with very little preparation, as we always do. But there's one question here about somebody you have written about, and it's asking, can you do a podcast on the Westies and what happened to them? And you, of course, they did feature a big part in your book, Cocaine Cowboys, because of the sort of when they came to prominence.
Exactly, because they were literally that sort of the first of those new, really ruthless young mobs that came in after this sort of old school criminal was, becoming, well, actually, I mean, what cemented their arrival was, do you remember the drug dealer guy called Pascal Boland?
I do.
So he was shot dead outside his home in Mulhuddard at the end of 99, or maybe the beginning of 1999. And he had been this sort of really tough talking dealer who had stood up to the likes of PJ Judge, who was nicknamed the Psycho. And he was really sort of notorious and nobody would take him on. But all of a sudden, these young lads who became known as the Westies did take him on.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning. That was their arrival. In actual fact, Shane Coates, who led the group, was only 18 when he shot Boland. Like, I mean, imagine that even now.
Yeah. I mean, they really arrived.
They arrived at a bang, literally.
They really did. And it was a very vicious feud went on then that's sometimes not referred to as much because it was kind of short and sharp and really, really vicious.
Exactly. So do you know what the Westies were named after?
Well, I presume they're named after the US Westies gang.
Yeah.
And the Westies gang in the US, I mean, the Westies challenged the mafia for a while. I mean, they were an Irish-American gang primarily. And certainly at some point they were at the same level as the
well, they sort of got involved in everything the mafia were involved in, that sort of construction industry, the extortion, boxing, they were based, were they, in Hell's Kitchen in New York?
Yeah.
And still synonymous with it. And they were ultimately taken down by Rudolph Giuliani.
Giuliani, yes. And I mean, when I say they challenged the mafia, like they really, really did for a while. They were regarded as being, a rival up at the very top. But the mafia kept going in a way, and I think the Westies, some of them, and they worked with the mafia. It wasn't as if they were always at war with them. But they when the head of the snake was chopped off by the US state, the gang disappeared really. And Hell's Kitchen, I think, I don't know New York that well, but I think it's now quite a gentrified sort of location.
Cool sort of spot. So back to Blanchardstown, where our own Irish Westies sort of emerged from. So Shane Coates was 18 when he shot Boland, and he had a sidekick called Stephen Sugg, and together they were very, very close friends, but they sort of were double trouble, if you know what I mean.
Sugg was, even though Sugg was kind of a good few years older than him.
About 6, I think, yeah.
So, I mean, probably why they became so notorious really was because of the level of violence that they used to collect their drug debts, which hadn't maybe been seen to that extent. So even though they remained quite localised in West Dublin, through Blanchardstown, Corduff, parts of Finglas, parts of Ballymun, they never became a kind of a national or an international operation as such. They totally controlled that territory, and they controlled it in a way that probably wouldn't be possible now because of CCTV and all of these things. But if people owed as little as 20, 50 quid for drugs that they would be tortured, slashed, every single debt was. There
was talk of them hanging, drug addicts from their ankles from the top of the flats in Ballymun.
Yeah,
I think they used cigarettes to burn and injure people who owed them small amounts of money. They were working with brothers, the Glennon brothers, who were also and equally almost notorious themselves. And I think all together, when they sort of got together, they became such a feared force despite their young age. Like Coates and Suggs were actually on the top of the Garda radar in that area while they were still teenagers. They were involved in joyriding.
Yeah.
Started out in armed robberies, and they were caught with weapons. They had robbed a butcher's. store, and they were caught and sent to jail for a number of years. And they both kind of were given a bit of a reprieve by a judge who I think saw their young age and believed that they were going to come out and rehabilitate and go straight. And they were allowed out of jail on the basis that they didn't mix with one another.
Yeah.
But like a couple of weeks out of jail, they were seen in each other's company and they ended up going back in. So on their second release, they were careful to keep that association under the radar. They learned a little bit from that until the ban on their friendship was lifted. It was quite amazing, really, for courts to try and ban a friendship or an association like that. So they did start by selling heroin, and then they quickly moved into cocaine.
Yeah, and I continued to deal heroin, I think, as well. I mean, they were involved in all sorts, every bit of the drugs trade, but it descended into feuding very quickly.
Which was kind of like, and that was Mark and Andrew Glennon that worked with them, and together they not only wanted to create their own supply chain, but anybody who tried to deal within the area of sort of Blanchardstown and out to Ballymun. And Blanchardstown, it's a huge area with vast estates there. They basically told other dealers that they worked with them or they were going to be run out of town. Yeah,
and there was some very serious criminals that we continue to speak about to this day involved in that that feud. For example, Jay O'Connor, who we did a podcast on, last year when he was convicted, he was one of the people who sided with the Glenans. There was, many others, these were people that had been heavily involved in crime from a really young age. But there was other situations involved, like the murder of a guy called Babyface Lindsay. And all of a sudden, all of these older criminals were out of the picture. These guys were all in their early 20s, and they brought a sort of a new ferocity to it. And I think as well, it was a time of growth in the drugs industry. So there was, although I said they remained very localised, they were still a target for CAB and for Gardaí because they were able to put away huge amounts of money.
And the big problem I think Gardaí faced, particularly not for the first time, but was that there was the Suggs and Coates, and then there was the two Glennon brothers, and there was about 12 other lieutenants.
Yeah, there was the Goulding brothers as well that we've spoken about. They were also very, very dangerous criminals, and Jay O'Connor. So there was a lot mixed in there.
And they were all using sort of baseball bats and vice grips. The stories were as notorious as the injuries. I mean, Andrew Glennon at one point used pliers to pull a tooth from the mouth of a young addict who sort of couldn't pay, and they terrified these people. And of course, word got around that there was no messing with them. But inevitably, there was that in, I suppose, a power struggle within. You have these alpha males all operating together, and they're going to fall out. And they did, of course, fall out.
Yeah, so there was a number of shootings, including Stephen Suggs' brother, and then ultimately the two Glennon brothers were taken out.
And I think Sugg himself went to Alicante initially after there was an attempt on his life, and he was soon joined by Coates, but his brother Bernard Sugg stayed behind, and then, of course, he was shot. In Spain, Coates and Suggs really took on... they carried with them, I suppose, the confidence they had built in Blanchardstown, and they decided they were going to take on some of the more structured firms out there, including what was left of John Gilligan's operation out there. And they sort of tried to strong arm and muscle their way in. And it didn't work very well for them because it was around 2003 or 4. The two of them basically went missing, and they were presumed dead.
They weren't presumed dead straight away because they were being spotted all over the place.
Oh,
if you remember, yeah. There was a bit of that for a while, but I think the word was clear ultimately that they were gone, and that there was the usual reports they'd fallen foul of Eastern Europeans and they were on the run in Thailand. But ultimately, I think the people that would have been associated with the remnants of the Gilligan gang are suspected of having them dealt with, basically.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't show up for another while, and when they did, the remains were found under concrete, in a kind of concrete grave in a warehousing area outside Alicante. But while they were away and missing, the Glennon brothers then, met their bloody end equally. Andrew, I think, was shot dead in the middle of the night in County Meath. And 6 months later, his brother Mark his car was surrounded. He was shot. And that was kind of almost the end of the notorious Westies until, of course, they were discovered in that grave in Cattrall.
Yeah.
Fat Tony Armstrong, who would have been a associate of John Gilligan, was questioned in relation to them, and obviously no charges were ever levelled against him. But I think they were an absolute, you say they only were in existence for a short period of time. They sort of bamboozled and thundered their way through the underworld. It was only ever going to end one direction for them, wasn't it?
Because it was only going to end, well, there's two ways it could have ended. I mean, they could have ended up in prison serving sentences for murder, or they were going to be shot dead. There's some criminals have that staying power, and they probably followed that trek where you leave Ireland and you go abroad, and there's some people that have the capacity to move up that level and become wholesalers and become importers. But people like the Westies or like the Dundons, they don't have that in them. They rise to the top quickly because of this overwhelming fear that they operate on. They use that level of extreme violence. People are terrified of them, afraid to cross them, will pay up, will leave drug patches for them to take over. But those guys, they simply don't last, and they were never going to last.
No, and yet we talk about the sort of the modern versions of them, some of them who we can name and some who we can't, and they're going in the same direction. All fueled really by cocaine, wasn't it, of course? And that was the point of their reason to be in that period of gangland history, was because, of course, when you had the turn of the century into 2000, that cocaine boom started, and the amount of money that was there to be got when you had that drugs entering into the recreational market, middle class users as well as true poly drug users. Everybody was using it. I think by about 2006, the height of the boom, there was some figure at one point that suggested that the cocaine industry in Ireland was worth 100 million a year. And I'd say that was really the tip of the iceberg when you thought it, when you think about it. It was always measured on whatever seizures were made and multiplied by 10. It was a very crass kind of a figure used by lots of law enforcement now, in fairness, all over the world. I'm sure that listener or viewer didn't expect a full mini podcast in the middle of one of our Q&A about the Westies, but nonetheless, there you go. That's a kind of a very quick tale of the Westies, their rise, their fall. And, they did make their mark on Blanchardstown, that's for sure.
Well, I'll go for another one that people always ask. Are the Kinahans hiding in Dubai, or does everyone know where they live? So the Kinahans, obviously, the Christie Senior, Christie Junior and Daniel are on that wanted poster that have been put out by the US Treasury Department. And every now and again, we'll get an email from somebody saying, if you give us a few £1,000, I'll tell you exactly where Daniel is at this moment in Dubai. And that's not worth as much as people think, let's put it that way, because people do know where they are. Now, I don't personally know where they are today.
At this moment in time, but we do know where they're living and we do know where they're frequenting and what they're doing.
And certainly the authorities, including the Gardaí, I believe, know where they are. So they're not in hiding as such. Certainly one of their associates, Raffaele Imperiale, who was subsequently extradited to Italy and is now serving a lengthy sentence and has told all to Italian authorities, like he was moving from house to house in Dubai under assumed names. Now, there's no reason to believe the Kinahans are doing the same. I think the guards probably over the last, and the Irish state over the last number of years have probably known, maybe they don't get an update every 24 hours, but they know where they are. I mean, they're living openly.
Well, they got, I suppose really the most scandalous thing that we saw in all the time since the sanctions were levelled against them was the fact that they had got, and thanks to the work of the the International Consortium of Journalists and others, that they actually applied for and got status in Dubai officially.
Yeah.
That they put their names to properties and to companies, that their addresses were there. I mean, they were operating out of a building in Dubai that I knew about for a long time.
Yeah.
Before it even appeared. And I mean, you could literally, it's not so easy to search facilities here for Dubai. A lot of what they have registered there is hidden away in this sort of free trade zone, and
yeah,
you can't just sort of Google it. But nonetheless, all the addresses have come out. We were able to see their homes. We were able to see what their investment purchases were. Everything has been done in plain sight, which is unusual, because a lot of the other members of the certainly the European cartel, like Rafael Imperiale, were living under assumed identities, are not as openly, including Ridwan Taghi, the notorious Dutch Moroccan criminal who was returned to the Netherlands in 2019. He was on a false passport over there, which is actually seems to be a bigger crime than anything.
Yeah. I mean, Daniel Kinahan was going to work every day, as far as we know. He certainly had
He was in the office.
He was in the office, and then as well, he was in and out of the MTK offices over there. So they were a totally different story. Christie Sr. certainly seems to have spent a lot of his time in Dubai in hotels, and has moved around a lot by all accounts. But Daniel has been living in regular properties. It's not been any mystery, nor was it any mystery where Sean McGovern was before he was picked up. So they're not in hiding. That's not the issue. The issue isn't that the authorities can't pick them up. It's that they haven't been inclined to do so. But that day may yet come. And
I think, look, political negotiations are still going on behind the scenes. There is a confidence here that Daniel Kinahan will be returned to Ireland. The last we have kind of from official sources are that a file is with the Director of Public Prosecutions. Have the charges come back? Possibly. Is there behind the scenes work going on with the Emiratis? 100%. And also public work with them, because we did, of course, sign an extradition agreement, not treaty, but agreement during her time. Helen McEntee, the former Minister for Justice, did that. And we have had Drew Harris, the Garda Commissioner, go out on a kind of a state visit as such to liaise with the Dubai police. We also have now members of An Garda Síochána based in Dubai and sort of working as liaison officers for that. So he is, and they are living openly for sure. And those visiting Dubai even this summer, do people go to Dubai over the summer? Or
well, I don't know. I suppose they can go any time, but people do come back and tell you stories, and you never know.
But they see him in the gym, and they see him in particular hotels in particular. I could tell you, if you were going, where to have a look for the likes of Daniel Kinahan. Although I do believe he's got a little bit weirder as time has gone on, and undoubtedly since the arrest and the repatriation of the extradition rather, of his friend Sean McGovern, he can feel the heat is very much on. But it's a weird situation, isn't it? It's a really strange situation, the whole Kinahans, the rise of them. The story hasn't come to an end or a conclusion yet. And there's so much more that has gone on behind the scenes that we are only just really still touching on. There's many more chapters to go.
Many more. But I do think we're edging to the conclusion. And I think, we'll probably hear it slightly ahead of when it happens. We'll start hearing rumours. I hear he's been arrested, and I think that day will come when you'll start hearing that, and then it'll be, once he's on that plane, it'll be out there. I don't think we're too long to wait for that.
Here's an interesting one. Now, I wonder where this came in from. Can you do an episode on Fat Puss and his brothers?
Yeah,
there's names from the past.
Yeah,
and for the moment, no, we won't be doing anything just at the moment, but we might do in the future.
But they have an interesting. Alan and Wayne Bradley have an interesting role in the evolution of organised crime as well. I think we've spoken about it before, but they were certainly linked to a type of crime that has kind of gone out of fashion, which was the heists on cash and transit vans, which was a huge threat to the state. I mean, bank robberies. I mean, when is the last time there's been a major bank robbery in this country? I mean, it must be nearly a decade ago. But if you look back to, the 2000s and even into the 2010s, you would be writing stories about people getting away with 2 million, 1 million, even more.
And the Securicore vans were constantly being targeted.
I mean, that was a big thing, and there was...
And they had to change everything up in the security and the cash. And of course, I mean, you know, we see now still a lot of those ATM robberies.
Well, I mean, they're small scale though, aren't they? I mean, what you were seeing then, there was another phase of ATM machines being dug out of the wall.
Yeah.
Diggers. Certainly up around the border, there was a gang specialised in that. Now they're kind of gone behind bars as well. So, I mean, the Bradleys were linked to the kind of cash and transit vans, and they were obviously associates of Eamon Dunn as well, known as the Don.
And previously Martin Marlow Hyland.
But yeah, it just shows you how if you were an up-and-coming criminal, bank robbery wouldn't be a thing to get into, would it?
It's a great name, all the same, Fat Puss, isn't it?
Huh? It wouldn't be a growth area, would it?
No, but they were like in their day, and didn't they have matching blue Subaru cars, and they used to drive up and down the road in these and stand outside their mother's house and all the rest of it. You know, as I said, the great name. I'm just going to bring you on to another question here that is slightly off this, but basically somebody wants to know, will you start selling merchandise?
Like what?
I mean, you could have great sort of usages of the old nicknames, couldn't you? Because
you could, but do you have the copyright? Do you have the copyright for?
No.
Or do you have the image rights? Like if you're going to do a Lionel Messi,
what would you do? Like
I wouldn't do.
Would you do a T-shirt collection?
No, you shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be.
You always get accused of what is it? Hyping up glamorizing crime.
Like
there you go.
Well, I mean,
you couldn't fight against that so well if you were selling Fat Puss T-shirts.
If I was selling merchandise, and maybe then I'd have to share the profits or whatever. But
you would. You just have to stick with selling your own merchandise. Nicola Talent cups or whatever.
I'm sure
could be a big hit for Christmas.
But we could do something around the old merchandise. I'm sure, no doubt.
Yeah, Nicola Talent umbrella or something like that would be good, would it?
I'm Nicola Talent, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.